So, good evening, everyone. We're continuing the 42nd chapter. We're going to pick up immediately where we left off regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, that he wasn't about just transmitting information, if you recall. It was about Moshe Rabbeinu bringing awareness of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to his people, and ultimately embedded, imparted with this das, that clarity in Elokus and godliness, with every single Yid throughout all generations. Now, to see the last week's message, which would lead into this week's class, as we always mention, to feel free to go to this very website, tinyonline.com, which you could not only follow the class, but easily follow the class, because as per the scroll bar, which is a separate scroll bar with a text, and also you can see all the previous classes from the very beginning of Tanya. So we're going to get right into it, into this again, because it's a clear continuation. It's, for that matter, a culmination. We didn't have the time to conclude last week the punchline, even though, as you recall, those who were joining us last week, that we tried to perhaps culminate the message orally, but we will read it again inside. Just one little point, which was spoken about last week, yet in the same, it should have been perhaps even brought out clearer that it's not something from the outward in, but rather from the inward of Moshe Rabbeinu out. Let me explain myself over here. When we say I mean inward out, is that, we pointed out what we see about Moshe Rabbeinu, the very beginning of his implementing his mandate as the Rai Mehemne, the faithful shepherd, as he's called, shepherding, pastoring Am Yisrael with 100% selfless devotion, not only to Am Yisrael as a whole, but to every single individual. We quoted the Medrash, where Hashem picked up on Moshe Rabbeinu is not only when he was pastoring his herd again, the first time Hashem appears to Moshe Rabbeinu at the burning bush. It wasn't only when he was walking with the sheep as the complete herd, but it was when the one sheep ran off and Moshe Rabbeinu went after that sheep and picked it up and held it in its bosom in order to bring it back to the herd. That's when Hashem revealed himself to Moshe Rabbeinu and says, this is the type of leader that I'm looking for. That's a famous expression we quoted last week. It's not only about a leader of Klal Yisrael, but a leader of Rebbe Yisrael, which means that individual Yid. Consequently, you're a true leader of Klal Yisrael. And we pointed out that Moshe Rabbeinu, again, this message, that Moshe Rabbeinu was about das, and the difference of overall understanding, appreciating, and knowledge is vast, is grand, as the das is about becoming intimate with a concept becoming real, tangible. This is clear to me that so it is, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu primarily brought, and this is primarily who Moshe Rabbeinu is, and consequently brought to Am Yisrael as their leader. It's about the clarity in Elokus. We mentioned the difference, again, the Alter Rebbe himself, in Likutei Amorim, the 3rd chapter. For that matter, you can go back by the left scroll bar, towards the end of the 3rd chapter, towards the last class, or the last 2 classes, was explained, again, Alter Rebbe explains this there. For that matter, he compartmentalizes the Chochmah Bina from the Das. He leaves it to the end of the chapters. We pointed out that because Das is a total different dynamic. All 3, Chochmah Bina and Das, are intellectual faculties, which the person has the ability to appreciate, to bring in, to introduce to himself, to his mind, a concept, an idea. But Das is taking that, while Chochmah Bina is about the information, Das is becoming, even if you will, intimate with the information. Hence, it becomes real to you. It's not a concept, but it's a reality. And again, you can see it there. For that matter, the Alter Rebbe brings there that pasuk which we quoted last week. V'ha'adam yoda es chava. When the Torah wants to relate that Adam related with Chava intimately, the Torah uses Ha'adam Yoda as Chava. He knew Chava, he always knew Chava from day one, but Yoda means he became intimate with Chava. The same thing, Das, when we think about Das as the final faculty, the intellectual faculty, which apparently, what do you need that? What's the advantage of Das? If you have Chochmah Bina, and again, Bina is about expansion to a certain degree, clarity, because you analyze, you dissect, and you appreciate the matter very clear. But nonetheless, it still stays a matter, it stays a concept. It still stays rather a concept, an idea which, by definition, any intellect is transcendent, intellect is abstract from reality, the person, famous expression, while heart is who we are, intellect remains, by definition, a concept. What connects heart and mind? This is, for that matter, the component of Das, that you not only know it, but you become intimate with the concept, hence it transforms your appreciation for the matter in a very different way, or rather, it's about transforming. In other words, it's not knowledge, but it's about transformation. It's not information, and becomes it introduces transformation, and then that's why it says Das is the connecting force between intellect and heart. And that's why we can become passionate about something if we appreciate it in the manner, particularly in the manner of Das. In other words, becoming intimate with a concept. Again, we explained this last week. You could see it in the last week's class. Just repeat it for the newcomers. Just to get into today's wording over here in today's the text which we're going to learn. And we mentioned this was with Moshe Rabbeinu on the onset. When he came to Klal Yisrael, he didn't just come as a teacher. He was indeed Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. He was the one who transmitted Torah. Moshe Kibul Torah Misinai. A lot of information. But Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't only about the information or passing on, relating information. Moshe was about transformation. Came to Am Yisrael, a nation which had something hovering in their only connection was that famous Pakid Pakadati, that one day it's going to be good and we ought to believe, and they did believe. Maminim b'nei maminim. Vehemin ha'am, and the nation, vayamin ha'am, and the nation believed, but it was something totally, the whole phenomenon of God, godliness, and his relationship to his beloved nation was a concept, it was abstract, and unfortunately, what namely contributed to this, their whole lifestyle, burdened by apartheid, by Egypt, in a very, very cruel bondage, and slavery, cruel slavery, and an oppression on a daily basis, which obviously didn't allow anything to settle, to resonate within them, of this reality of Hashem, God, godliness, again, his connection to his people, and so on. When Moshe Rabbeinu comes, he doesn't just open a Gemara, let's call it, and just, okay guys, we're going into a class, find time between your labor, and we're going to teach you some new information. No, Moshe Rabbeinu demonstrated to them, yes, Hashem wants you, loves you, he is, namely, it's that is what Moshe Rabbeinu brought to the awareness of Am Yisrael, that Elokus is not abstract, Elokus is here, real, palpable. You can see him. Showed them the makis as Hashem is leading the leader. Hashem is the only balabas, the only authority, and at that point it was a very grand shift by Am Yisrael, for that matter, also by the Egyptians. Lahavdil, as the pasuk says, "V'yedu Mitzrayim keni Hashem." That Mitzrayim, even Egypt, starts appreciating God on a very different level. Again, you find the lashon v'yedu. And this was Moshe Rabbeinu's presentation throughout. Here, it's true, it's real, it's clear. You mentioned the famous Keli Van Veil, that even the fetus, the Gemara says that even Ras, Shivcha Layam, the greatest Nevi'im that the maidservant saw by Kriyas Yamsuf, the greatest Nevi'im, the greatest prophets did not see. Keli Van Veil, they were pinpoint, this is God. And this is the very beginning, and then throughout the entire 40 years, through the Man, through Be'er Shel Miriam, obviously together packaged with the Torah, which it was said that Torah is a godly revelation, Anechi Hashem Elikecha, and this was Moshe Rabbeinu. So when I mentioned, just to get back to, we began this, that it was from, not the outward in, and Moshe Rabbeinu was a tactic of Moshe, how to capture the minds and hearts of Am Yisrael, to bring them close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but more so, namely, and this is the message over here, this is who Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Shadish and the source of Moshe Rabbeinu's Neshama, hence and consequently it expressed himself in this way that he's showing Am Yisrael this reality of God. It wasn't just like kind of, let's see the best way we can get the people over, so Hashem's going to perform miracles and I'm going to be the conduit to bring this to the people and to show them bring that profound awareness into the minds and hearts of Am Yisrael, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we're going to use that as not only again to transmit the information, but to present to Am Yisrael an energy, a transformative energy, to penetrate again the hearts and minds. No, it begins inward, because this is the message of today. But this is who Moshe Rabbeinu is. Moshe Rabbeinu represents the Das Elyon Elokus, the supreme knowledge of Atzilus. What is Atzilus? Atzilus is a world which hosts the Ein Sof. We explained this many times. So everything in Atzilus is the kind of the perfect image when you find Midah, then the Chochma Bina Das, and then the 7 Toldos, in other words, the offsprings of Chochma Bina Das, the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is, each Midah is a perfect expression of what that midah is all about, and again, because it carries that perfect energy of the Ein Sof, forming into a midah, or allowing the midah to express its energy, which again, many times we spoke about, or we did speak about in the past, this dichotomy which exists in Atzilus. On one hand, it hosts the Ein Sof, it represents the Ein Sof, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in the face of infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there is no Chochma Bina Das, there's no midas. Midas are about measurement, limitation one way or another. How do you have the two, a world which hosts the Ein Sof, and eventually it is expressed via midas? I mean, how does that usually work? It doesn't apparently fit, because again, if it's Ein Sof, it's not modud umugbol, it's not limited. Yet it's not modud, it can't be a midah. But at the end of the day, it was explained in the past as well, to the contrary, that the midas of Atzilus is the most perfect manner that a midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be manifest, could be expressed, because it hosts the Ein Sof, which means, in one hand, there is a important shift between the Ein Sof and Olam Atzilus. We explained in the past as well that Olam is Meloshen Helam Behester, the Gemara, which describes the terminology of Olam, world. World comes from the expression of Helam Behester. It conceals over the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu by definition. So there's a paradigm shift from Ein Sof to Hashem allowing Himself to be expressed via Olam, and then eventually, namely, this becomes grand. This Helam Behester takes a different step and a different toll from Bria, Yitzira, because ultimately nothing so purely hosts, or no Olam is as pure. In other words, it's merely an Olam which hosts the purity of Ein Sof, like the Olam of Atzilus. Bria is an important step, a quantum leap step from Atzilus to a different phenomenon completely. And again, we explained this not to go off. So Atzilus, in the end of the day, yes, it is an important shift from the way the Eibishter forms himself by himself, the Ein Sof, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet, in the same token, there's an expression of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to an Olam, which by definition is an Lashon Helam Behester. It conceals over the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's certain of grand a grand jump, a quantum leaps jump from even more perhaps than from Atzilus to Bria. But yet Atzilus is ultimately a Eilam which is Etzli v'Samach. It says one of the reasons it's called Atzilus because it's close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It reflects the Ein Sof one way or another. Hence every Midah, even though again the Midah dimension, that's the Olam dimension of Atzilus, but nonetheless the Midas are nothing less than perfect. If it's Chochmah Atzilus, it's a perfect Chochmah, a perfect Bina, because again, and that's why the Chochmah of Atzilus, it says Chakim v'lei b'Chochmidi. It's not the regular Chochmah which we're acquainted with, which we know about. This is something which is a total different type of Chochmah, a total different type of Bina, because again, it's Chochmah, Bina, Das, and so on, of Atzilus, which is a perfect world. Lo yigur chara, there is no evil in Atzilus. Even subtle type of evil, which is again, in terminology of Chassidus, there's no even ascholas hayesh, nothing of yeshus at all. It's all about the Ein Sof. Now when we say Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama comes from Das, or is aligned with Das Elyon, with the supreme Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the supreme Das of Atzilus. So what is the Das when you think about it in the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? In the context of Hashem's Midas, Das is about clarity of a Lukus. It's a Midah, it's a faculty which brings about the transparency of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or transparently brings out with the amitius, the truth, the authenticity of Ein Sof. So we did reconcile, we said the Alter Rebbe brings in the second chapter that Moshe Rabbeinu is from Chochmah. Yes, because everything begins from Chochmah Atzilus, and all our neshamas begin from Chochmah. But Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chochmah of Atzilus, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Beis, is manifest by Moshe Rabbeinu. Even he's born neshama beguf, as the neshama enters in the body. He's not impacted by the entire journey from Atzilus to his entry into Eilam Hazeh. Again, we explained that in the second chapter, a bit picked up on it last week. But namely, Moshe Rabbeinu is about that third midah, that das. He also obviously begins Chochmah. Moshe Rabbeinu is about Bina as well. But namely, what he represents is the Das Elyon, the supreme knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The supreme Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, The supreme Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is again, it's a faculty which demonstrates the purity of Elokus. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is. And that's what we mean that from inwards out, what we began today's classes, that it's not again a way of Moshe Rabbeinu bringing Am Yisrael close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or bringing that awareness to the people, but to the contrary, Moshe Rabbeinu is Das, represents Das Elyon, represents the supreme Das of Atzilus, which is about clarity in Elokus. Consequently, Moshe Rabbeinu comes to his people. This is what he is going to present to them, that very clarity in Elokus, which he, by definition, represents in who Moshe Rabbeinu is. So, when we say that Moshe Rabbeinu imparts with every single Yid, Moshe Rabbeinu shares not only the way that a person could come close or become aware of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Moshe Rabbeinu imparts and shares that very energy of his own Das, which is the Das Elyon, which is the supreme midah, and the supreme faculty of Das, the way it's in Atzilus, which is about transparency, of the clarity and the purity of Elokus. He imparts with every single Yid, and as such, every single Yid, when he taps into that Moshe Rabbeinu within him, he is able to, again, from within, look at everything in a very different light. He finds that Ein Eid Milvadeh very clear, very convincing, very transparent. So when he uses that, let's call it that software, in today's terminology, of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is, again, representing that Das Elyon of Atzilus, he's able to see everything in a very different light. He's able to appreciate a Elokus similar, one way or another. Again, no one ever compares himself to Moshe Rabbeinu, but similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, because this is Moshe Rabbeinu's chip, which he imparts with Am Yisrael. This is the software of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is embedded in every single Yid. And this explains us, again, back to the Gemara, when the Gemara asked the question why Moshe Rabbeinu is asking or demanding Am Yisrael, Yiras Hashem, to have that fear, true fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We mentioned last week, fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not a badge, it's real, and this is what is demanded of every single Yid. Fine, but why did Moshe Rabbeinu say it precisely in that fashion, which he made it sound so simple when it's not simple at all? This was the question of the Gemara. Again, you can see this in detail in last week's class, and the Gemara answers. And that, in the face of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's taka simple. But the Alter Rebbe says, well, he's asking from you, from Am Yisrael. Again, we're saying this very quickly. You can see the whole Gemara and the Alter Rebbe's, the way the Alter Rebbe so beautifully asks, or so eloquently asks the question. In other words, how the Alter Rebbe dissects the Gemara, and namely eloquently how he explains this Gemara. That it's not, from Moshe Rabbeinu, it's something simple. And the Alter Rebbe asks, so why is it, but he's not asking for himself, he's asking from Am Yisrael. So how does that answer the question? But the Alter Rebbe, this is the Alter Rebbe answers, that the expression of the Gemara is precise. Yes, to Moshe Milsa, but it's not only Moshe Rabbeinu as that grand Moshe Rabbeinu, it's the Moshe Rabbeinu which exists within every single Yid, which Moshe Rabbeinu imparts with his das, with his supreme das, and allows every Yid, or incorporates it into the mind, into the structure, and of every single Yid, into the Metzias, into the mind of every single Yid, that the Yid could appreciate a lukus somewhat similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, because he has that chip, he has that software. Again, we to appreciate the message here that Moshe Rabbeinu embedded within him, and when he taps into that Moshe Rabbeinu within him, Yiras Hashem, fear of God, becomes as well something simple. So let's just read it inside. He says that we'll start from the Hainu Shemamshech Chinas Hadas. He draws the Das L'Klal Yisrael Leidas Hashem, to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kol Echad Kifil Asavus Nishmasa, each one according to the appreciation, the grasping. In other words, the manner that his neshama could comprehend, and is the Shor Shulamayla, the source of the Yid's neshama. And as we mentioned last week, again, there is another condition that or another dynamic over here, which is also part of this Moshe Rabbeinu imparting his das with every Yid. Not every Yid is the same as we know it, as we see it. Not every Yid has that clarity and eloquence in the same exact fashion as his fellow Yid. And the reason is because the dosage, again, you have what type of computer do you have? That this software will function quicker, as opposed to the same software would function different in another computer, slower, and so on. Sometimes different image, and so on. And same thing, and it's important to note again, because the Rebbe emphasized that Moshe Rabbeinu imparts with that Das Elyon, but everyone based on the source of his neshama. We spoke about this in the past as well, and its root on high, the nikosa, and how much it's able to nourish Misheresh Nishmas Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Hashalom, from the source of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Hashalom, Hamushreshes, which is anchored and rooted the Dasa Elyon in the supreme knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should be Yud Tzviris, the Atzilus of the 10 Sfirot of Atzilus, Hamyuchodes b'Matzilon Baruch Hu, which are one, which are united with their emanator, blessed be He, which is Hashem, Shehu v'Daite Yechad v'Amado. Because when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Das, as we explained last week as well, based on the Rambam, that when it comes to us, where we appreciate Das, knowledge, in the end of the day, it's a separate faculty. When we appreciate any matter, we gave example last week, at a certain time, 2 + 2 is 4 was a concept, and we introduced it to ourselves. We weren't born with that knowledge, especially when you think about other more complicated matters. There was a time I didn't know, so that knowledge is, the information is separate from me, but more so, even the knowledge is a gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a human being. So there's the healthy human being, that gift of knowledge, which that knowledge is able to explore identify and ultimately internalize information with that gift of knowledge. So it's three entities coming together. So the das, when it exists on the human level, it's a separate entity. It's not who the person essentially is. One would perhaps argue that the das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how can it express, how can it host or transmit the very purity and clarity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Isn't it a separate faculty? So based on that Rambam, again, we explained the Rambam last week. It's a very clear calculation why, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'daita echad. Again, not to elaborate this, which was explained a number of times, we explained the Rambam clearly in last week's class. But in the end, the message over here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's das is unlike the way it is by us, that it's three separate entities coming together, me, my knowledge, and the information which I absorb, which ultimately can come as one, but they begin as three separate entities. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, him, his knowledge, and the information that he knows are on the onset one. This is all part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in this case, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's das, the das of Atzilus, is Hashem, who v'daite echad. So when Moshe Rabbeinu represents that das in other words, this was Moshe Rabbeinu hosts and represents that das in Elokus. It's not only the das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of that das, and that das is one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Moshe Rabbeinu has that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, because who? V'daite echad. And when Moshe Rabbeinu imparts it with every single yid, so the yid has that through the das, again, about Silus, which Moshe Rabbeinu embeds into that very yid, and Hashem's das and Hashem himself are ultimately one. So the yid is able to identify overtly, with clarity and transparency, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again, in his conscious mind, in his conscious psyche, as such, he could see HaKadosh Baruch Hu with that level of clarity. Hence his Yiras Hashem, the awe, the reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he sees and he comes face to face with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, intimately with HaKadosh, intimate connection and relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hence the reverence, the awe, the fear is something which is quite simple or granted that will come about in a very obvious manner in his heart expression of Yira, of Pachan, again, of this fear, of this awe, of this reverence, because he taps into the Moshe Rabbeinu within him or her. And this is what the Gemara says, and again, to culminate this idea, that this was the Gemara says, that when the Posuk says, V'ati Yisrael, the Moshe Rabbeinu is asking from Yid, and Ma Hashem Elokecha Hashem Mimach, he makes it sound so simple. And the Gemara says it's not simple as we know it. And the Gemara, again, is not negating that it's not attainable. Everything is attainable, and we have to toil, and we have to exert much energy to achieve something. Says that it's attainable, but in order to reach it, to reach that level, you have to work very hard. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu precisely using an expression that it's very simple? It's not, Yiras Hashem is not simple at all. So what does the Gemara answer? Yeah, like Abba Moshe Rabbeinu Milsa Zutra say, it's small, it's easy to attain, easy to express. Moshe Rabbeinu to find his Yiras Hashem, the reverence in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was obvious because he Panim Dibur Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke face to face with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was real to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Alter Rebbe asks, and that's what the Gemara again explains Moshe Rabbeinu's precise expression. The Alter Rebbe asks the question, well, that's about Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to Am Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe says that the Gemara's expression was precise because we all have a Moshe Rabbeinu within ourselves. And the Gabe, in the face of that Moshe Rabbeinu, that supreme das that Moshe Rabbeinu imparts with his people, with Am Yisrael, with every single Yid, Yiras Hashem is taka, something which is easy to attain, that expression of that true reverence in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I recognize profoundly. I appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu as with total, again, with that transparency and that clarity, because I'm tapping into the Moshe Rabbeinu within me. is as well. Davar Pashut is something which you could even categorize as Milsa Zutrisahi, something clear, something small even, in other words, something that we can easily tap into. Have a wonderful evening.